Lieutenant Colonel Russell Zapanic spent 25 years in the U.S. Armed Forces, including 3 years in U.S. Army Special Forces, commonly known as the Green Berets, and was the director of worldwide SR-71 operations for 2 years, along with being an SR-71 reconnaissance systems operator during operational missions on the SR-71 Blackbird. Today, Russell Zapanic, and I hope I'm coming close to your name there, is living in Australia, where he was formerly the director of Australia's Air 5077 program, which you and I probably refer to as the E-7A Wedgetail, Australia's new airborne early warning and control electronic warfare aircraft. And today, he is enjoying his well-earned retirement and joining us today on theaviationist.com. Mr. Zapanic, thanks for joining us. Is that how you say your last name?
Szczepanik. It's really easy.
Okay, Zapanic. It's a little easier than it looks.
Well, everybody in my family changed their last name to Stefanik, except my father refused.
All right. I think that it's safe to say among aviation enthusiasts and historians and pilots and members of the military that if you talk about the single most iconic aircraft in all of aviation history, you won't get them to agree on any single aircraft, but the SR-71 Blackbird would be on every person's short list. Why do you think that is? Why has the SR-71 Blackbird captured everyone's imagination and attention since the aircraft first flew?
Well, the reality is that the SR-71 was second or third choice for what was required based on the information that needed to be acquired. And nowadays, I find that, it takes, 3 or 4 or 5 years to get an airplane airborne or even developed. And the SR was given 2 years maximum to be airborne and fully operational. And unfortunately, there was nothing that was ever built for the SR-71. No one even knew what it could or couldn't do. The only requirement at the time was it had to fly over 75,000 feet and be Mach 3. And that was the 2 requirements. And that was given to the civilians. And by God, they did it within 2 years. We actually flew operational sorties at the end of our 2 years. And that had never been done on any airplane before. And all the things that had to be done for the SR-71 were probably acquired through not reasonable attempts, but they found ways to acquire them and put them back together again. And when I found out about it, I had no idea that the airplane had to actually become bigger by 14 inches every time you flew.
Wait a minute, let's back up just a second, because that's incredible. The aircraft, talk about that, it got bigger by 14 inches each time it flew?
Yep. It got bigger by 14 inches because the heat did it. I mean, it was incredibly hot airplane, hundreds and hundreds of degrees. And that's probably why we ended up in spacesuits, because we had to have something that controlled the amount of heat that we were facing just flying the airplane.
Mm-hmm.
Because it got so big, but it got so hot too, that you could not afford to not have some expansion in the airplane. And they came up with a way to do it.
I understand, I've heard lore over the years that when the aircraft was sitting on the ground prior to a mission, when it was being fueled, that it would apparently leak profusely because that expansion from heat at altitude and speed had not taken place. Is that true, or is that just kind of a wide scale?
It's absolutely true, because fuel was not even loaded until you were going to fly. And that didn't happen until the crew was ready to fly and they were sitting by the airplane already in spacesuits, ready to go. And then they decided that they better put fuel on the airplane because it was going to leak out. And it did. It just poured out in various areas. And the poor guys that are actually doing all the hard work underneath are covered in stuff because the fuel's coming out.
Wow.
And so, our job then, because we didn't check the airplane, that was checked for us because we could not move the spacesuit around, really. And but the guys, as soon as we got on the airplane, that airplane was started, and it started making its way to the runway, even leaking fuel. And then once we took off and got the airplane heated up, it moved to 14 inches, and the fuel stopped leaking.
Now you used a different type of fuel than most other jet aircraft used. You used if I recall correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, you used a fuel called JP7. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah, because it doesn't burn easily. You could throw fire in it all day and it won't burn. But once you put the additives in it, then it becomes very hot, and then it will burn.
All right, so it's a little safer to use that fuel.
Well, it was to help the airplane too, because if something happened when you're taxiing out, your opportunity to have a fire is pretty high on regular fuel, but not with JP7.
All right.
There's a whole canister that's added into the airplane that has a special fuel inducer, but that can't get exposed to outside air because it will explode.
Right.
So that is filled or pushed into the fuel once you take off and things start developing like it's supposed to.
Right. Okay. So now your background is fascinating, not just because of the SR-71, but for many reasons. First of all, your background in Army Special Forces, and then as a U.S. Air Force officer and SR-71 crew member, and later on program director for the SR-71 operations, that's incredibly unique. Can you kind of walk us through a little bit of the history of your career?
Well, I started out enlisted because my draft number was very high and didn't have much of a choice. I was going to go in the military one way or the other. And I thought about it, but there's no options. So I did go in the military. They were just starting to get the special operations working. And I thought, well, why can't I do that? And they said, well, yeah, you can apply. And if you get through the training, then you'll get to go and do things with the team. And you can go overseas and you can have very interesting time learning new people, which is not always easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, and then when all that happened, I thought about it, but once we did our years of combat training, I wanted to get an education because my family didn't do that sort of thing. And so I thought the only thing I can do is apply for a military.
You can tell them why you decided.
What?
You can tell them why you decided to go into the Air Force.
Yeah, well, yeah, they wanted me to go to West Point. They wanted me to go to the Navy, Annapolis, because of all the training I've had. And then I thought, what I really think I'd like to do is that airplane thing that keeps going around and everything. I think I'd like to go to the Air Force Academy. And boy, did I catch it for that. Wow.
No kidding. What was the problem with the Air Force Academy?
It wasn't Navy and it wasn't Army. It was
well,
really simple.
You know what they say about the Air Force, it's like the military, but different.
Yeah, well, it was, and the SR was incredibly different. And it was one of the problems that when we actually got the SR up and going and everything, we weren't telling anybody what we were doing. And that, of course, upset the Air Force.
Right.
And upset the Navy, upset the Army, but we weren't permitted to tell anybody those things.
It's interesting you mentioned that because one of the many things you've already told us that's actually very fascinating is how quickly the SR-71 program was made operational. You mentioned in the space of just a couple of years, whereas as you also mentioned earlier, now I think the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program was a 15-year program, and you know, it's still at its leading edge in the early parts of its history. So I wonder, why did the SR-71 not last longer? And in the literature that I read about it, one of the things that you just touched on was that there were a lot of inter-service, there's a lot of inter-service attention to the program, perhaps not all of it charitable. What?
Well, the reality was anybody who actually made it into the SR-71 program had to go get a new physical, and it had to be a special physical in another place, and I can't really say where it went, but they actually took 5 days of giving us space, I don't know what you'd call it, but they give us space options. If you get through the physical in 5 days, then you will be acceptable for the SR-71 program. If you don't get through.
In many ways, it was perhaps more like the space program than it might have been like being a C-130 pilot or something.
Yeah, like that. It was a space program, and that's what bothered people more than anything, because all that information and actually getting through everything was top secret and was never passed to anybody unless they actually did that job. And because once everybody found out that the SR-71 was flying, it caused a lot of issues for people because no one was allowed to know anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know when I did my physical, 5 days later, I thought, oh, Jesus, I'm never going to make it through this. Because I had certain issues with my body that had been done in other things. And then when they got me together at the end with all the people that did all the physical work, which is 5 days of physicals, they looked at me and said, you know, technically you should be dead right now. Oh, I thought, well, great. I feel better already. And they said, with all the things you've been through and people like you that have been through, you should not ever have an issue that would cause you not to do what you need to do. And with all the things that in my situation I went through, I still had a lot of, let's say, useful things that were useful for me, but other people didn't think so.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I passed and ended up getting through training, which was, again, the hardest part. That was a year's worth of training, even though I had already flown airplanes and trained people on airplanes. You had 1 year of training to be able to fly that airplane. And if you failed anywhere along, you were done.
You were out of the program.
I
noticed, you know, in doing some research about the program, I noticed that far fewer people have flown the SR-71 or flown in the SR-71 than have been into Earth orbit. Far fewer.
Yes.
So that's actually very remarkable. Now, in addition to being the program director for worldwide SR-71 operations, you were also a reconnaissance systems operator on board the SR-71. What did a reconnaissance systems operator do that you can actually tell us about?
Well, it turns out, and I hope that people don't get the wrong impression, because flying that airplane's just very difficult also, and doesn't really matter. But all the information comes out of the back where the reconnaissance systems operator is, because that's where all the information is for computers, for failures, for this, that, everything. And the RSO does all the hard work, quite frankly, because they're always having to watch where that airplane's going, how fast it's going, what altitude it's at. If we have somebody firing at us, which happened quite often. So the guy in the back he sees all that, and he has to make some very difficult decisions and tell the guy in the front the same thing. Hey, we're in trouble. We got to do this now. And it's done.
Well, realistically,
So,
you're the reason why the aircraft exists, and you're the reason why the aircraft is airborne on that mission. It's to put you up above areas of interest.
well, I don't know. After all the guys I've flown with, I hope you don't tell too many people that. Most of them, there's still a few around, and I'm afraid that they have a bad habit of calling me and tell me certain things that probably can't be repeated in civilian life. So, but no, it was a very unique situation because the guy you flew with was the only guy you flew with. If one of you was sick, unable to fly, whatever, you're grounded, both of you, because you fly with each other every mission without fail.
You know, that's particularly interesting because in doing a little bit of research on both the front and rear positions in the cockpit of the SR-71, one of the things that I realized was that the two crew members are incredibly reliant on each other.
Yep.
For all phases of the operation. For instance, in many two-place aircraft, where there's a crew member who sits in the front and a second crew member who sits in the rear, like a T-38 or something like that, there's a set of flight controls in the rear of the aircraft. In the SR-71, did you have flight controls in the rear of the aircraft?
No, it was the only Air Force airplane that's never had flight controls in the back. And the main reason was because the guy flying in the back had so much to do and so many things happening that he was responsible for to basically direct everything. You couldn't afford to touch the airplane either and fly it as your primary job. You had to be available to see all the things that were happening and make decisions immediately. And the front seater, you know, they had a hard job too because they got to fly the damn thing.
Yeah.
And that's not easy, especially when you're going at Mach 3 plus. That's not an easy thing to do, but most of the things they decided probably needed to go in the back. We needed people there that could look at everything, make instantaneous decisions, because you're not talking to anybody on the ground. You just don't do that. You have to make all the decisions. And you have to set up, if something happens to the airplane, you're the one that has to make all those decisions to fix it or get somebody to fix it or guide somebody to the airplane, whatever it took to make sure that airplane was recoverable. Otherwise you have to eject if you can't.
And, you know, I don't mean to dramatize your role, but I mean, it's an incredibly unique mission because during the operational phases of the mission, say for instance, the aircraft happened to be over denied territory.
Well, who would do that?
If there were an emergency, that suddenly becomes an entire order of magnitude more serious. As we've learned from, I was in Moscow last summer and I saw the wreckage of Gary Powers' U-2 in a museum in Moscow. They wouldn't let me make a video there, but you know, it drives home the point that this was an order of magnitude much more serious even than the already incredible demands of flying at ultra high altitude and incredibly high speed above Mach 3. So it adds one more dimension of how incredible your mission was. Did you, when you guys were at altitude and at speed, was there a sensation that the flying was somehow different than looking out the window of a Boeing 737? Did it feel or look any different to you?
It was absolutely different. I mean, at least on a Boeing airplane, you should go from point A to point B and get there. But, you know, if we were attacked, and that did happen, people didn't like us where we were, then we had to come up with things to recover the mission. And we had to come up with things in case they actually shot at us, which was a waste of time. But if they did, we had to be able to maneuver the airplane very quickly to ensure that that weapon never reached us, because we were still doing what had to be required from the people that hired us to go fly, to come back and get that information to the people that required it.
Now,
So,
we know from anecdotes about the SR-71 that have been published, for instance, there's a set of famous stories about an SR-71 mission over Libya, where the Libyans launched a series of weapons at the SR-71 and had no success in intercepting it, of course. When, or rather if you were ever in a circumstance where weapons were launched against you, I mean, I don't see a Mach 3 70,000 foot plus altitude aircraft making a lot of violent maneuvers. What might have happened if a person were to ever experience that?
well, I can tell you, as soon as we discovered that those weapons were launched, we accelerated the airplane and started climbing. And we would climb up as high as you can imagine and accelerate to a very quick acceleration. I really can't go into the details, but it's way over Mach 3 to escape those systems and still get the information we needed for the people that put us out there. But if somebody fired at us, we accelerated immediately and climbed very quickly.
And inside,
we didn't go over. Go ahead.
What'd that feel like when that happened? What'd that feel like in the cockpit?
I hope they miss. No, it was a matter of making sure that we reached the altitude, we got to the speed, we hadn't lost an engine trying to get there, which is always a problem. And it's just something, I really don't know how to say it, but it's something you just get used to and you want to keep doing it and you don't really think about anything else. That's your job. That's what they paid you for. And if it comes to taking the airplane apart, which you hope you don't, because if the airplane actually jumped up in the front and started accelerating and the engines went forward, you would probably break the airplane and you'd be flying in the parachute.
Yeah.
Because once the airplane even started moving up, if it wasn't controlled perfectly, it would come apart. It would actually break.
Yeah. Mostly because of the incredible loads of forces on the aircraft because of the speed and so forth.
Well, the other thing it had an issue with, if the engines weren't reacting like they're supposed to, they will actually shoot part of the engine forward and basically starts going to subsonic at Mach 3 plus, which is a bit of a problem. So you're trying to recover those to bring them back in to get the airplanes back up to Mach 3 plus as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes two people to do. But once you get that done, then you can continue on. Because if it goes subsonic, then you are a target. And you have very little to hope for.
Yeah. Now, speaking of many of these unique features to the SR-71 program from its development into especially its operational history, what would you suggest were the most unique or remarkable things about the program? And I realize it's a tough question because all of it was unique and remarkable, but what are the things that stick out to you?
I think it was because it was a very unique airplane and it was really worked on very hard. The majority of the guys that actually worked on the airplane, there were some military, but not many. Most of them were civilian. Mm-hmm. Most of them came out of companies and all sorts of things. And these guys just worked their hearts out to make sure we always had a good airplane and make sure that if we had problems, they could help us with it. So yeah, that was a pretty big deal for us. I'm not sure I'm answering your question right, but.
Well, I think it speaks to the fact that the overall support required for the mission to get the aircraft into the air, to provide life support services, to get you into your suits, prepare you for a flight, things of that nature, that those things were absolutely extraordinary. It wasn't a matter of putting on a flight suit and walking out and doing a walk around on an F-16, not that that isn't an extraordinary process as well, and then getting in the cockpit and talking with the crew chief and taxiing off. It was a much more involved process. You know, now acknowledging how much of the program remains classified to this day, and that we have to continuously kind of dance around that when we chat with you, one of the most interesting systems on board the aircraft, what that you read about in all the SR-71 books, so it's obviously not secret, is the astro-tracker positional navigation system. What was the astro-tracker? What was it? How did it work? What did it do?
It was a special navigation system that we'd start as soon as we started moving out of our where we were and started going to the runway. Then the navigation system would start looking for stars in daylight. And it would pick up about, and this is just a relative number, about 35 stars as we were moving over to the runway. And so we knew right away, we had an instant navigation system right ready to go. And it was all done in daylight, but it was all done through the stars. And the stars did it. And if you ever had a problem with the navigation system, then you had to recover the stars. But you could do it during daylight. It was very unusual for it to fail. Very, very unusual. And it was very accurate.
You know, it harkens back to exactly the same way Magellan or Christopher Columbus navigated by orienting their position over the Earth to the stars above them.
Yeah, well, I was pretty young, so the guys that actually did it were obviously a bit older than me, and at least then, not anymore. I've already solved that problem. But these guys, it was amazing because they had no information. All we did was have a picture of somebody thought, can we do this sort of maybe? But there was no information. There was no tools to do it. It took special tools. Everything had to be redone or built or started. And those weren't for young people like me at the time. They were for people that had been through all this. And the majority of them were civilian that had been building things that were pretty amazing. And building this airplane was amazing. No one thought it could be done. And everybody who tried to do it had difficulty doing it.
Speaking of that, you know, some of the big personalities that were involved in the SR-71 program, like Kelly Johnson. Did you ever meet Kelly Johnson?
Yeah, quite often. He would come and visit us when I was in training almost every week. I think part of that was because he wanted to go to the pub, but I think he always was there. He and his guys were always there with us, talking to us. How can we help? Are we making this right? And most of us didn't have that deep engineering training that they had. And, but they were there for us all the time. And if we even hiccuped, they would figure out how to fix it. And that was very unusual. We only had 2 military guys working with us in the US Air Force because, of course, Kelly Johnson made them take off their uniforms and say, you're going to wear t-shirts, not wearing those uniforms, because we didn't really until, you know, we went out. Then they gave us an orange flight suit, which didn't really help because you kind of stuck out there a little bit. Kelly Johnson was an amazing guy, but, you know, he did enjoy going to the pub with us, you know, just to learn things, just to learn, nothing else. I mean, you know, they have water there too.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, they do. They got it.
Did you ever cross paths with Kelly's successor, Ben Rich, who in the US, we kind of know him as the father of stealth?
All the time. Yes,
really?
All the time. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, there weren't too many people flying the SR, and it was easy to keep an eye on how many there were. I mean, it wasn't like a big squadron. It was I think there were 15 of us, 15 total of two guys, and that was it. And then some of those guys, part of us was deployed all the time. So there was normally back home probably 8 or 9 crews at the most, and the rest, everybody else was gone. So yeah, I don't know. It worked for us. It was very different compared to what we were trained to do. The military can be very matter of fact. I know,
Right.
hard to believe, but they're very matter of fact.
Yeah.
Well, there's a good reason for it, quite frankly. There's a good reason for it. And it always bothered me flying the airplane when I couldn't tell the guys I knew that I had flown with before, and worked with before. I can't tell you what I'm doing or where or why. And that really bothered me, but it was required, it was necessary. If something happened to the airplane, there couldn't be a result for somebody to come and pick us up that we could be captured. So, but it all worked out. But that airplane to come back online, or to come online and be working in the short period of time, was absolutely not even thought about. No one even could imagine. But these guys did it. But they worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we were always on call with them. So, and working with them.
Did you ever have, either during operational missions or other missions in preparation for operational missions, did you personally ever have an experience where you had to recover from an airfield that wasn't your planned destination?
Yes.
How'd that work out when you just showed up at an airport with an SR-71?
Well, I'll tell you some of the details. I can't tell all of it, but we were doing a mission overseas, somewhere very far from the United States. And as we were coming back, we actually refueled 6 times while we were flying this mission, which was pretty tough on everybody and pretty tough on the airplane. But anyway, we were on our way back to the United States, and both engines didn't want to work.
Holy.
And we were in the middle of the ocean, and I thought, oh, this isn't going to be good. But anyway, we actually got enough going to make it to the east coast of the United States. But then we had to land immediately. So we we lost our navigation system, which was very unusual. And we were about 300 miles south of a US Air Force base. So we turned the airplane and started calling them and said, we are running out of fuel. Our engines aren't working right. We're going to have to land on your property. Clear the property, because we are going to land one way or the other, because we had no choice.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really step on the brakes there. You got to use a parachute to land. So, but luckily 300 miles south, they launched some airplanes, a KC-135, which we needed the fuel, and it drove us into the runway north of us, and we actually landed on another airport. And then the police came and solved everything for us, and captured everything, and put the airplane in the hangar, and said, okay, you guys can go to the pub. We'll tell you when we need you. And that was it. And then we actually got another airplane a few days after they got everything back to normal, and we actually flew back to California. But I thought we were going to have to go in the ocean for sure. But
wow.
We planned on it, got ready for it, but luckily we made it to land. And then the question was, could we land at an airport? Oh, probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
Or can we land at a military base? Because we didn't want to screw up a regular airplane base, because once we get on that runway, we're going to land. We had no choice. We can't do anything otherwise. But the military cleared their runway immediately and launched airplanes to help us. And they lost survival equipment and people in military airplanes that were doctors that could save us if we crashed. So, and it worked out. It worked out okay. And we ended up going back to California and starting all over again.
It sounds a lot like the contingencies for recovering a space shuttle mission if something goes wrong on one of those.
I won't say it's exactly the same because we actually had engines, but yeah, it's pretty bloody close. Yeah, it was, you already figured it out. It's very similar. It's a similar sort of thing that has to be done. They just don't get the engine. Now we could probably lose engines and land too, but we prefer not to.
Right. Now, we've talked a little bit about how long it took to develop the program, and we've talked a little bit about how long the program lasted, and then it sort of, the SR-71 sort of went away, and that people on my side of the screen are aware of, there doesn't seem to be anything that has taken its place. Do you think there's anything out there that has replaced the SR-71? What can't be possible?
I think there are thoughts that the airplane might be replaced. The reality is that the SR-71 is still flyable. They're not all gone. They are still somewhere. The question was, could somebody build another airplane better than that one as quickly as possible? And that, I don't know. I'm not involved in that anymore. I couldn't tell you. But the SR-71 could still operate if it had to. Now, whether or not they actually want to do that, because our guys are too old to fly, they'd have to redo the whole thing, and that would be very difficult.
And there's been an ongoing debate between manned reconnaissance platforms and unmanned reconnaissance platforms. There are very long endurance remotely piloted aircraft now for gathering signals and photographic intelligence. And during the time that you were with the SR-71 program, there was even the D-21 program, which, based on what I've read, and please correct me on this if I'm wrong, the D-21 program sounds like it didn't work out to expectations. What was your exposure to the D-21 drone program?
I didn't have a lot of exposure to it because we were doing SRs. The drones do have a usefulness. There's no question about it. But the problem has always come up, can the drone really operate without somebody in it? That came every day, it's the same sort of thing. And the reality was that the guys that actually had been involved in that kind of stuff through their whole careers said, no, you need somebody in the airplane. Somebody's got to be there. Well, that didn't go over well with everybody else. And the drones do work okay. I mean, they do have a purpose. There's no question about it. But I still think, and this is again personal, that having somebody in that airplane, or maybe even on the ground with a connection to that airplane all the time, fully trained on how to fly an airplane, then I think you maybe have a real good thing. But I don't think just putting a drone up there is going to solve all the things that you hope for with people that actually will feel things differently, see things differently, right or wrong, they will. And I don't know how capable the drone is to do that. I just don't know. But I think you need a person somewhere.
And speaking of, gathering intelligence in the terrestrial or atmospheric space, whether it's with a drone or a U-2 or an SR-71 or something like that, is space-based intelligence gathering, satellites and so forth, are they a replacement for atmospheric intelligence gathering, terrestrial intelligence gathering, or is that?
I wouldn't think so. I'm not an expert there. I don't really know, but I would not think so. I think you still need human beings somewhere. Somehow, I think it's really critical. I mean, I don't care how good the machine is, even the same thing with an SR. Yeah, could you fly one by itself? Probably. I don't know. But will it do all the things you really think you need to do, even when you don't know you need to do them yet? And I would say the same thing is with satellites. I mean, I know they're much better now. I know they do amazing things, but are they capped of something? You know, the airplane you can actually maneuver around. Can you do that with something else, the satellite, immediately? I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know.
Right. We can't let you go without trying to tap you for at least a few of your best SR-71 stories, because that's, you know, that's what our readers and listeners really want to hear from an SR-71 pilot. And it strikes me that you're kind of a soft-spoken guy, so it's a little tricky to draw that out of you. But I mean, you flew the fastest operational aircraft in the world on what could fairly be characterized as the most dangerous missions in the U.S. military. What happened up there? Give us some stories.
I can't tell you all the places we went, but I can tell you that we did a lot of work out of California, as you might already know. And my daughter's helping me now. So talk about how you can read the numbers on mailboxes and women sunbathing. Oh, yeah, that I'll get away with that, I'm sure. But unfortunately, I actually did it on a training mission once, which caused some discussion about what I should be doing, not what I was doing. But it was just training mission, so I thought it was okay. But anyway, so go ahead again.
What did you do? What happened?
Oh, it was flying up and down the coast on a training mission. And I could see in the back seat, you can actually see the ground. And we were flying over swimming pools. And I just happened to know, as I looked down, because it's magnified, I thought, nice bathing suit. And then I found out later that they had been tracking us the whole time. And when we landed, we were met by a lot of people wanting to know why were we tracking people in swimsuits. But it was training, just training.
That's an excellent answer.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if the people on the ground thought it was, because it was pretty loud. But they obviously knew somebody was there.
So, why was the SR-71 retired anyway? Why did such a capable platform go away?
Politics. The SR-71 was very expensive to fly. Very, very expensive, because it was unique. There were things, anything that was built for the SR was done every time, upgraded, fixed by people who could do it. And it was very costly. And when we moved to other places or we flew long distance, it was very costly airplane, because it took a lot of things to make it work. And a lot of people that weren't allowed to know about the SR-71, which was most people, weren't allowed to talk to anybody on the SR-71, which was most people, weren't allowed to tell them anything at all about what you were doing, where you were going, how you were doing it at the time. And it upset the people that were in the military, in the Air Force, as an example, who were not allowed to know. Because the generals, and they wanted to know what we were doing, as you might guess, why you were doing it, how you were doing it. And the answer was, can't tell you.
Can't tell you.
Can't tell you. It's classified. It's above your pay grade, which I probably shouldn't have said, but I probably paid for it later on. But anyway, we weren't allowed to tell them, and it really bothered them. And I understand it bothered them, but there were things that were done that to this day people won't know about. They'll be hidden, and they probably will stay hidden. A lot of things have come out, but the guts of it, I guess, will probably never be known.
Really?
That's my feeling. I don't think anyone will ever know. And I do know that those SR-71s, if required, could probably be used. But if you're an Air Force guy who outranks me, and they want to know what I'm doing and why, and I tell them to, well, I can't say it, my daughter's here. No, you may not know. It really causes a problem for the other side, because then they go right to everybody else and say, we're being screwed over here because these guys won't tell us what they're doing. And we want to know, or we want to be able to run the systems. No, I mean, it's a year's worth of training just to get to the point of being able to run that thing. And you may not make it through there anyway. But, you know, we couldn't tell anybody. And that bothered somebody who had a star on, or 2 stars or 3 stars. And we had a captain's bar or something. And we just said no. I said, okay, well, we'll get back to you, but you're in trouble. You know, I know, I've been there many times. Yeah. But that was just the rule.
What's it like as you talk about the program today, having been in the program, to have to keep all these secrets? Do you find it, is there a desire to tell the stories, but you can't tell them because they're a matter of national security, or what's that feeling like?
Well, we've actually, not us per se, but a lot of people have actually have pictures of slides of different things to do with the airplane. And they have different information about it that they've gathered from these slides. Do they have it all? And that's available now. You can actually get that on the internet.
Right, there's quite a bit.
Yeah, but are there things there that won't be there? Yes, absolutely. But I have no say in that. It's up to the military and the government. If they want to let all that out, that's up to them. But I, as a person, I never even was allowed to see the top secret things that I had to do. They all exist somewhere, and I'm not allowed to see them. And that's okay. I don't mind, but I don't know. I guess I don't really have a good answer for you, because there are some things that I think, even now, I wouldn't know what to really tell someone with all the fancy equipment they have today and all the things that are making things better. You know, a lot of the things we use were pretty minor, really. I mean, they were fancy and they did some amazing things, but they weren't near as fancy as the stuff they have today. Not even close.
You know, the interesting thing about it, though, and I understand the point you're making, and I agree with you. That being said, the leap in technology that you guys made, from where you began to what you achieved, I would suggest is greater than any leap of technology we've seen within maybe the last 3 decades. A good point is, we just got done kind of celebrating a couple of manned space mission, an orbital manned space mission. So what? That's the Mercury program. And that was done decades ago. We just repeated the same thing again, and it seems to capture everybody's attention. It's extraordinary, there's no question about it. But you were doing this decades ago. And you were doing it without the sophisticated electronics that we have today. Much of what you were doing with vacuum tubes, or immediately following that. So the technological advancement and the technological leap and the leap of faith and the risks that you and the SR-71 crews took, I would suggest is incomparable to anything that we know about that we're seeing today. And I think that's why it captures people's imagination to such a great deal, deservedly so. You know, you guys, this is a little bit of a cliche in the aviation community, but you know, you guys had the right stuff. It's incredible.
Yeah, it was. I mean, especially to put that airplane on and actually make it work in less than 2 years. Nothing has ever been done today, even close to that.
No.
Why? I don't know. Could it be done? I don't know. But I know it had to be done at that time for a very special reason. And they did it. But part of doing it was making people do things to build that thing that they weren't doing it by the book. I can tell you that.
Yeah, and it was a whole, when you talk about the Skunk Works and Kelly Johnson and all of that, you know, those guys were, as you say, they were outside of the boundaries of
Yeah.
conventional development and so forth. You know, I want to. You're such a great interview, even beyond the SR-71 program, that I gotta, if you'll permit, I gotta hit you with one question that you're uniquely qualified to answer, more so than really anybody I've ever spoken to, and that is, I'm 58 years old, and in the early phase of my life and my military career.
Boy, are you young. You're a youngin'.
Yeah, the Cold War was still going on.
Yeah.
Has the world changed? Are things different now when you think about the former Soviet Union and now Russia? What do you think? What has changed?
Well, I mean, what we did was, I'd say a lot of people will get this wrong, but a lot of the things we did and they got to the SR was basic. They did the basic things, try to get things up to a point where they would do whatever needs to be done, but very basic things. Do I think today, I think that the people today and the things they have done are pretty unique, but I'm still not convinced that somebody couldn't have done this a different way, a better way, an easier way, a quicker way. But people have gotten so, at least, again, this isn't fair, but in the SR program, we were in a hangar with the closed doors on an airfield. And we had people working every day, every night, whatever it took. We actually took the first SRs apart in the hangar and brought them up to a different place at night and then put them back together again and flew the next day. Could they do that today? Yeah, they can, but they're going to have to change how they do things. And there's got to be enough equipment out there and smart people that can do that in 2 years too.
Right.
But you have to get over some of the baloney that goes in between and allow the people to do the work that they're asked to do and leave them alone for a while. Help them if you need, or they'll come and help or ask your help. But by God, if you have people doing it, you've got to let them go and give it a try. Will there be a mistake or two? Hell yes. Heck. I'm 74 years old and I've retired 6 times and I can't get it right yet anyway. So, but I think people have to just think there's more to it than just accepting that 6 years is the requirement. Because there are smart people out there. And I know they can do it, especially with all the equipment that's available, but you have to allow your people to do it.
Right.
You can't beat them up as soon as they walk in.
Yeah. Do you think the world has changed since the SR-71 was operational?
What do you mean by the world?
Well, if you talk to, my dad worked for Boeing in World War II on the B-29 project.
Okay, well, he would know it.
And so when my dad was working at Boeing, he was designing a bomber that was specifically intended to deliver nuclear weapons against the Japanese, because they were a mortal enemy who was not only a threat to our national security, but to world security.
Yep.
So years later, after my dad passed away, my niece married a Japanese guy and lives in Japan. So the world has changed almost 180 degrees in the space of when my dad was designing the B-29 Superfortress to when my niece married her husband Yukimi in Nagasaki. So what has changed about the world from when you were flying operational SR-71 missions to today, if anything, from your perspective? You're uniquely qualified to be able to render an informed opinion on that. Has the world changed?
I think in some ways the world has changed. I think in some ways it hasn't. I mean, you still find a lot of people very bigoted about things that don't make any sense at all just because they're from another country. I mean, I have 3 daughters that have different country backgrounds, but they're regular people. I mean, they do things just like other daughters. They give me a lot of attention. They give me a lot of help too,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of advice too.
We're all adopted from 3 different countries, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What'd she say?
Yeah, no, he can't hear because he's got his headphones on. But I'm from China, and then my 2 older sisters are from Korea and Thailand. So.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, I didn't really think. I thought about it at the time because I was actually still in the military, and every time I'd come back from an operation, I'd have a new daughter, and I kept thinking, wait a minute. I'm gone a lot. I know that. I'm sorry. I don't have a choice. But then I've learned to just keep your mouth shut and move on.
Mom got bored.
But luckily,
funny.
well, we have our son was our born son, but he's in the U.S. and he's a nurse. I thought he was going to go to military training, and he changed his mind at the very last minute. But no, my daughters are just like daughters. I mean, I don't see any difference. As I said, I get a lot of direction. I'd like to change that, but I'm not sure which way I'd go anyway. But no, I think the world is changing. I mean, we have friends all over the world, and I think that makes more and more sense for people. You got to get over this thing where, oh, well, I only talk to so-and-so because they're so-and-so. That's ridiculous. The world is changing, and it's moving fast. So you're going to be involved with people from all over the world. Get over it. Just do what needs to be done.
Right. Well, you know, a big part of the advancement that and I would agree with you. I would agree that the world has come a long way in the last 5 or 6 decades, and it has, as we're experiencing in the United States right now, it has quite a ways to go. Mm-hmm. That being said, it's your generation that helped advance the condition of the world to the better from where it was in the post-war era, post-World War II era, the Cold War and so forth, into a much better world and a much more connected world. And for that, we're all of us from my generation and other generations are immensely thankful to your generation. There's no way that we can adequately thank you or repay the sacrifices that you made for a better world for us to live in. So thank you very much for that.
Oh, you're welcome. But again, a lot of the changes that we became part of were because of the things we were doing. Like in the military training, a lot of people were from different races, different this, different that. And yet we fought with them. We did things with them. So it sort of was given to us that you are part of this team, period. Mm-hmm. And that just kept going because a lot of our friends now are from different races and don't think much about it, quite frankly. But I know it's still difficult for people.
Yeah.
You know, I'll be very honest with you. There's people out there that still haven't got it. And will they get it someday? I probably won't see it, but I hope so.
Yeah.
Because the world is changing.
Right. And, you know, and thank you so much once again for your time.
Absolutely.
One final question for you to kind of wrap this up for this time. When was the last time you saw an SR-71 and what did it feel like?
I saw one that was on, it was somewhere around here. They've put a couple of them in areas where you could actually go see them, you know, pull the engines and everything out of them. And that was probably about 9-10 years ago that they have one put in here. I don't even know if it's still here. And I actually went up to see it just to see if it looked the same like it did. And yeah, it did. Looked pretty much the same. And it was packed with people. And as soon as somebody said, oh, hey, I know you, you flew it. No, I didn't do anything. But I was happy to tell them, yeah, it was a pretty amazing airplane, especially when you think about what happened and how it happened and actually remember the good things it did do for people, because it actually did. It helped a lot of people do a lot of things, made people think, made people actually talk to each other, made people actually work together. So yeah, it was worth it. I mean, it only cost me one finger, so that's not too bad, really.
Wait. we got to go back to that. I said it was the last question, but then you spring this on me.
Oh no, well, sorry, I shouldn't have done it. This came on a ride-on lawnmower at my house. I was riding the lawnmower at my house because I was mowing, and all of a sudden it started tipping on the side. And I thought, well, this isn't good. So I shut everything off and tried to get off. I jumped off the back, or got off, and my foot got caught under where the blades were. And I thought, well, this isn't going to work. So I lifted it up and tried to move it. And as soon as I lifted it, the blade came through. And it ruined my best finger. I used that finger for a lot of reasons, and now I can't. So luckily I have an extra. But anyway, it was a real eye-opener when all that happened, because that's quite frankly the most obvious thing that's ever happened to me. Everything else is inside, but this one I can't get away from.
Now,
other than that, it's okay.
How long did you fly the SR-71? How many years?
I was thinking about 4.5 years, because as soon as they upgraded me to something else, you have to stop flying. They won't let you fly anymore. I mean, I can fly the T-38, but you can't fly the SR. You can only fly the SR with the other person all the time, nobody else.
All right.
And when I got promoted, then I thought, well, I don't want to be promoted. I'd rather fly. And they said, nope, you got a choice. So be it.
But you flew the fastest, highest flying operational aircraft for years, yep. 3.5 years, no injuries, over places you can't talk about. You made it out fine. You go out to mow the lawn and you lost your finger.
Yeah, and he's also been in the war, and he didn't lose any digits, and then he came home like an idiot, and then he decided to mow the lawn and lose his finger. So yeah.
Well, the part that bothered me the most is I thought I could just sew it back on. Get some stuff and just sew it like every other thing I did. But I couldn't keep it on. It kept falling off.
Oh.
But anyway.
Well, that's absolutely incredible. I've done a ton of interviews with a ton of flight crews, and there's no question you're absolutely the best. And I think we've only scratched the surface here. So, first of all, also thank you to your daughter for all of her patience and help and technical help.
Okay.
So thank you.
Huge amount of help for me. Huge amount of help for me all the time.
Good.
Especially with these bloody horses.
I just wanted to get the stories out. I just think he's got so much knowledge and so many fun and interesting stories that people are interested in. And the plane was such an amazing machine. And I just think it's so cool that we have the opportunity to talk to someone directly who flew so many missions with it. And and thank you for helping us get the story out, because I'm really grateful for it.
That's our privilege. I'm doing this. I was in another industry for years, and this is what I've wanted to do my entire life. So it really is. It's a privilege and a labor of love to be able to tell these stories and help tell these stories. So I think based on my boss, David, who's in Rome, Italy, I think based on what he's talked about going forward with this is that our intention, with your approval, is to put together one polished show that is going to have, the best questions and so forth in it. And then that's what we're going to air.
Right.
And then the purpose of today, I wanted to get to know a little bit about you. I wanted you to kind of see what it was like to work with me, and you can decide if you like working with me or not, or if I'm an annoying reporter or whatever. A lot of us are pretty friggin' annoying.
I wasn't going to say that, but I'm happy though. Next time I use my lawnmower, I'm happy for you to come over and give it a shot.
I'm not coming anywhere near you if you're on a lawnmower. You can take me for a ride in an SR-71, but if we're cutting the grass, I'm out of there. So,
Well, I appreciate getting to know you a little bit. I wasn't sure I wanted to do this, quite frankly. Of course, I had a lot of help from you know who.
yeah, but she's right. You know, your stories are they're incredible, and we need to capture these. They're unique.
Yep.
Once they're gone, they're gone. So, you know, we're responsible for making sure that there's a living record of this.
Yeah. Well, I'm still running almost every day at 74, so I'm not done yet. I'm getting closer. I'm getting closer, but I haven't quite made it.
Please tell me you've hired a lawn service.
No, good Lord, no.
Of course not. He's not that smart.
I can do it again. I'll
Well,
try my left hand.
I was going to say you got 9 more chances.
Yes, I got my left hand. I'm good to go. Anyway, but I do appreciate you. Nice to meet you. And
you both.
Kelsey's been a big help to me, and she always has been. All the girls have. So, yeah, I've been pretty lucky in life. Still vertical for the most part, and I've been very lucky. So I can't complain about anything.
Well, you know the saying. I mean, you strike me as. I'm not just saying this to make you feel good. I'm saying it because based on the context of our conversation, it strikes me as being true. You know, you're an extraordinary man, and you make your own luck. So while you say you're lucky, I would suggest that it didn't just fall out of the sky.
Well, I came close to falling out of the sky a couple times, but luckily I got to take the airplane too. So.
I'm glad you had better luck with the air. You're never going to live this fun putting down.
Well, it bothers me on the road too, because I use it a lot, and people laugh at me. Like, what are you doing? Oh, never mind.
All
Don't
right.
tell anybody.
So I'm going to sign us off here, and then we'll be in touch with you, and we'll
make sure
here.
you get hold of Kelsey too. Okay.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Go through me.
Yeah, I'd like her to know about it too.
Well, yeah. Just go
Will
through
do.
me. It's
Okay.
easier.
Thank you.
Okay.
Lovely
Perfect.
to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you very much.
Have a
Yeah,
good day,
Thank you.
and we'll
Thank
speak to you
you.
again soon.
Okay.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.